years.
Cool.
And number one, I know she's not a racist, and you really can't hold people accountable to what they say or do when they're on Ambien,
right?
Or a drug like that, so I totally didn't get it, and I thought it was dumb. So I brought her up. I had a conversation with her, and the last time I played Vegas, I brought her on stage, and the audience went nuts.
That's great.
I just sort of had her back. And, I said, now we're going to tour. I go, because I don't care what I say, and I'm saying it with a straight head. And, I don't fold or bend with the political correctness. It's ruining everything. It's not helping.
You've been
when
on the front
lines.
lines.
To monitor what comedians are saying, are you kidding? That's all we have are the words.
What's your
so whether you're clean or dirty, you're getting your thoughts out there, and that's it. And it's comedy, and it's to make people laugh. So that's how the whole Mr. and Mrs. America thing happened.
Yeah. And what's your advice to people out there in comedy or anything who go through something like Roxanne? What do you think you should do? Should they not apologize? Should they be authentic to themselves? What's your advice from all your expertise?
I apologize for nothing when it comes to the world of stand-up comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Because the key word is comedy.
Yeah.
And a lot of these newer comics, they are buckling.
Yeah.
But because they don't have a career yet to back up on. They can't say, screw everybody, I'll just stay on the road. When a comic today is trying to get a special, and the network people are going, oh, you can't say that in the special.
Mm.
So you got a choice to make. And that's why, in my opinion, mediocre has become the new great, because that's all people are being given now with these specials.
Yeah.
Because they're making you cut out anything that has, some guts to it.
How has the scene changed since you've, you kind of broke big in the late 70s, early 80s. What have you noticed about the scene today, the comedy scene?
Oh, no, I took off my career took off in 88.
88.
Okay.
The exact date is February 13th, 88.
Wow, what happened then?
I had on a Rodney Dangerfield HBO Young Comedian special, and thank God it was in a day where you can say what you want.
Right.
And that was on a Saturday night, and Monday I was the biggest comic in the world.
Wow, that's great. So how do you feel about how things have changed over the years? Any other thoughts besides what you were mentioning about comics being afraid to go all out?
Well, that's the big issue now.
Yeah.
It's just got to end, and it's almost like, they should just refuse to not do what they do.
Yeah, wouldn't someone actually make their careers by actually being authentic and not folding? I would think that would actually be the way to go, right? In order to get a career.
We do live in a day and age where you have, not just radio, but all the podcasting. And a lot of friends of mine have become giant through the podcast world. People like, Bill Burr and Joe Diaz and Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
I mean, Joe Rogan years ago had, I think it was 2 sitcoms he did, then Fear Factor, which was gigantic.
Yeah.
But now he's first taken off. I mean, his podcast is bigger than most television shows.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he has about 18 million listeners, and now he's first the comic he always wanted to be. He's gigantic.
Yeah.
And it's all through podcasting that these guys basically said, screw everybody, I'm going to start a podcast. Look at Mark Maron's career.
Yeah.
All these guys are gigantic now, and it's great to see it because, I used to think because, there's never going to be another Howard Stern. I mean, he took, radio where it's just never gone and just became the biggest in history. So I would think about, how is that ever going to be topped? That's never going to be topped. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the podcasting began. Like, I never even thought, like all of a sudden you're hearing this word podcast, and now podcasting is the new media. It's gigantic.
Without
it's
any
amazing.
restrictions from the FCC. Not that we don't love the good people at the FCC. But yeah, there's that air of authenticity where the gloves can come off and you can really be yourself.
No, and just when we think the podcast thing will be gigantic, something else will go on because we live in a world of social media. So my whole point is that a comic, although they're being, hindered by, networks, can build a gigantic following. And at a certain point, a network, if they have any brains, doesn't deny that comic they're special.
So one thing I also wanted to ask you about is that you've really suddenly gotten a new wave of attention and acclaim for your dramatic acting the last few years with Blue Jasmine and with Star is Born in particular. I'm just wondering, did you always know that you had that in you, or was this something that sparked this in the last few years that made you...
It's really what I started out to be. Was more of an actor than a comic, and through that whole thing, my comedic chops built, and so did that career. So, I mean, the acting is fun, and I've gotten to work with some great directors like Scorsese and Woody, but, I sort of get bored, when I'm on a set. I just don't want to be on a movie set for a long time. Like when I do a live show, I show up, I'm in the dressing room, next thing you know, I'm just crushing the crowds.
Yeah.
And that's what I enjoy the most. It's great, to have worked with like Lady Gaga. I mean, she's, one of the big and one of the most grounded stars in the world. Just a great girl. And, I love doing this movie with her. I love all the projects I worked on, but like I said, it just takes forever when you're shooting a scene and, just waiting around and gets to the point where I want to say to the director, can I get out of here,
Yeah.
Is it true that you beat out Ray Liotta and Robert De Niro for the part in A Star is Born?
Yeah, it wasn't about beating any...
That's the narrative I'm starting. I'm starting a huge feud.
I heard you want to box him too.
About a feud. I knew that what had happened is I knew that John Turturro was up for A Star is Born.
Okay.
And I have nothing but I think he's one of the greats. Mm-hmm. I love the guy. So I was on the set. And one of the producers came over to me and he said, Dice, you're crushing it with the part. And I said, well, I better, because, Turturro was going to play it, And he goes, what about DeNiro? What about Travolta? Mm-hmm. And I go, why did you even say that to me? Now, because then in my head, like I'm not being good enough because these guys are like the greats,
right.
So I didn't beat out anybody. It was just Bradley saw, I talked a lot when I met with Bradley about my own sons. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even know what part he had in mind for me, if any, So it wound up Lady Gaga's father. He saw the real father in me come out when just discussing things. Because I talk about them a lot, and the reason I talked about them was he was a couple months away from having his first child. So I talked to him about fatherhood, and how you always have to be there, and, these parents that let their kids grow up on their own today, like, that's why you have these idiots walking around that just live their whole life through their phone, and, I really brought my sons up. You got to teach them everything. So, through that conversation, what do you think Bradley's thinking? Oh, he'd be great as the father.
Mm-hmm. Huh. Well, that's cool.
And that's how it happened. So, it had nothing to do with beating out any other actor.
What about?
I would like to say that, but the guys that were up for it, or wanted it, whatever. You know, these are the greatest actors in the world.
Gotcha.
Liotta and, you know, DeNiro. You know, these are the great guys, you know.
Yeah.
And I just, you know, when it comes to acting, you know, I look at myself, yeah, I'm capable, you know. Like everybody went nuts from what I did in Vinyl,
Oh, yeah.
you know, with Scorsese, you know. And I'm like, you know what? I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad I got the job done.
Let's see Ray Liotta do 15 minutes of stand-up.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, my thing is, if you talk to me about stand-up, I know there's nobody like me.
Mm-hmm.
I know how much I've been emulated through the years. I've seen so much of my material my old stuff just taken and reworked and twisted and redone. And I don't live off my old material, but I know what I created in comedy. I know that what I created in the early 90s is never going to be repeated by anybody. I'm glad I've encouraged a lot of comedians and, you know, guys like Bill Burr and Sebastian Maniscalco and Louis C.K. and Joe Rogan that have all gone into arena-sized places. But I created that game because I did, you know, over 300 arena shows, you know, between the years of 89 and 94, I think, or 95.
Yeah.
So I just couldn't take it anymore. It was too much, you know. I'm one guy. And, you know, when you're doing like 80,000 people a week, you know, it knocks you down after a while. So I'm glad I influenced, but that moment in time, you know, that could never happen again. Number one, it was before the internet, I wasn't following anybody, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, not on the everybody just followed me into stadiums. That was it, you know. It was an ad in the newspaper, and, you know, I didn't grow up studying comedians. I grew up studying bigger-than-life personalities and rock stars and drummers and fighters. And, you know, my image had nothing to do with the world of stand-up. It was more of an Elvis-y type of, you know, rock star comic. I wanted to create, and I did, a comedic hero for, you know, for the public at that time. And, you know, I'm cooking for the last 31 years as far as you know, just a big-time comic.
Yeah.
It never went away. Now I do whatever I want. You know, now it's whether it be clubs or, you know, theaters or, you know, like my agents want me to go back into the Garden for the 30-year anniversary of, you know, when I did the Garden, and I said I already went back. I went back in 2000 and sold it out again.
Wow.
You know, but they call it a legacy show because they go, Dice, you're the guy that created this game. But we'll see, you know. If they, you know, pay me. That's how I look at it.
Well, so...
Because I will tell you this, no matter what you do as a comic, there is no better place to do comedy. I mean, I know I was an event comic with all those arenas, and I did the Rose Bowl with Guns N' Roses. I did all that stuff, but there's no better place for stand-up comedy than a club.
Yeah,
that's what they're built for. You know, like I said, I couldn't care less about comedy.
Okay.
You know, I wanted to create something else, something bigger than comedy. You know, don't forget, years ago, comics were just opening acts for singers. They were good for 10 minutes. And honestly, a lot of what I see on TV today is about the same.
Yeah.
You know, because, like I said, it's mediocre. It's not great stuff. It's just not, you know.
Yeah.
Like I said, I named a handful of guys that are terrific, that are unbelievable. But 90% of what they're putting on, you know, on TV, I'm going, really? I understand. What I do love is how hot comedy is. You know, like for years I was hearing, how everything goes in cycles. And, you know, honestly, like when my career took off, Rick Rubin, who produced my albums, and, you know, he said, this is the end of comedy. This is, and that's why we did